It's going. Hello, and welcome to the Daily Bible Podcast with Tricia and Michelle. We are just two friends reading through the Bible chronologically and encouraging you to do the same. And you can follow along with us on our website, dailybiblepodcast.net, of course, here in the podcast. And we're going to have in the show notes for you today's Bible reading and also tomorrow's Bible reading. So, our Bible reading today is Genesis 11. 1 through 26, verses 1 through 26. First Chronicles chapter 1, verses 24 through 27. Then we go back to Genesis 11, verses 27. Finish out the rest of that chapter, then go on to chapter 13 and also 14 and finish out chapter 14. Can you believe we're already through chapter 14 in Genesis already?
It's amazing how we can move through the Bible, and it's just 15 minutes a day. So it
Yep.
can seem overwhelming at first when we're thinking we're reading the whole Bible, but these little steps that we're taking, these chapters that we're reading, it's amazing how quickly we can progress through the Bible.
And I love that we're reading chronologically. We're taking the timelines of the Bible historically. And so otherwise I think that Job comes after Esther, and we're going to hit Job pretty soon.
He's coming up.
Um,
Job is
he's
coming
coming
up.
up. And so I just love that we're taking it chronologically and that we've already dove into we've already dove into First Chronicles. That's awesome to me.
So we've already
So,
cut out some of that too. Some of First
yeah.
Chronicles is done.
Yeah, there you go. It's shorter for when we hit First Chronicles. It's shorter
Yes,
because I know that sometimes some people are like, "Nah, I don't like Chronicles." And then there's those other people who are like, "Oh, God taught me so much in Chronicles."
exactly. He's going to teach us
So
something.
that's true. That is so true. So let me recap what we learned today, what we read today. So about this time in Genesis that we're reading, all the people of the earth spoke the same language. Like they all spoke English or they all spoke
I
Mandarin,
don't know if it
but
was
they
English. Yeah, there's something.
you're true. You're right. It probably was not English. We know it wasn't, but they all spoke the same language. So if they went someplace else and they were trading or bartering, everyone knew what language they could do that without going, what did you say? But so God's people, they all gathered near Babylon to build a tower and they wanted to make themselves famous. That's what we do, right? We all think it's all about us. So, do you happen to see any trouble coming here?
Yeah, it just seems like whenever there's pride and like wanting to take the place of God and
Mhm.
make our name famous instead of his, it seems like it's leading to trouble.
Yeah, it's so leading to trouble. So, what God did, because God can do these things, he confused their languages and he scattered them. Can you just imagine how he confused them and scattered them? Like, I just, in my mind, like a movie theme is sort of, or, is sort of playing out. And I'm like, how did he scatter them? Like, did he just go poof and they scattered? I don't know.
You're
But
like one day talking to your neighbor and you've always been able to talk to them, and the next day you go to their house and they're saying something and you don't understand. But then maybe
yeah.
the neighbor like three doors down, you can understand them. So then you just start hanging out with them
Uh huh.
because you guys can talk the same language. And then you find someone else. And I think they just kind of grouped up in the languages that they started talking. I mean, that's the way I've always kind of pictured it in the movie in my mind. I don't know.
Yeah. That's cool. That's really cool. I like the movie in your mind. So just as we're reading today, just when we thought we've gotten past genealogies, because it seems like it's like, okay, come on, when are we done with these genealogies and hard to pronounce names? It's like, okay, are we done yet? But this time there's a special purpose because the genealogies wrap up as we see that Shem's line is leading to Abram, who is later known as Abraham. And what I love about the genealogies this time and what we just read was how women are slowly trickling in. We start to see how so and so had other sons and daughters. And then we see Abram and Nahor taking wives. And then we see Abram settling in Canaan and Lot moving his then we see Abram and Nahor taking wives. And then we start to see Abram. He's settling in Canaan, and Lot moved his tent as far away as Sodom. Oh, I'm missing something there, aren't I?
Canaan, Lot moved tent to Sodom. God blessed Abram. Are you missing something?
Maybe not. Okay,
I don't think so.
sorry. Abram settled in Canaan, and then Lot moved his tent as far as Sodom, and God blessed Abram. And we see Abram moving to follow God. That's just that hit me today was just that Abram moved to follow God. Like
Mhm.
he had that same relationship that we were talking about that Noah had with God.
Mhm.
That's what Abram had.
Yeah, and what it made me think of, which I totally agree with that. He had that special relationship that God chose him for a special reason, but it started with his father. So remember yesterday we were talking
Mm,
about how our decisions impact generations. It was Abram's father, Terah, that started the journey first. So it says that Terah took his son Abram, his daughter in law Sarai, and his grandson Lot, and headed for the land of Canaan. So we don't know why Terah stopped. Maybe he saw a really nice pasture he wanted to live in. I don't know. We
mm.
don't know what it
Yeah.
was. Maybe he got ill, but Terah stopped, but he at least got the journey started. So they left the land of Ur, which was a big city, lots of wickedness there. They started
Yeah.
towards Canaan. Tara got the journey started, and then as a mom, I think of, okay, maybe my part of this whole history is just to build something that my kids can continue, to start a journey
Mm.
that my kids can continue. And I've thought of that when it came to raising my kids. I felt God whispered that to my heart before, like maybe what I'm doing and serving Him and God's plans for me is just to get it going for my kids so that they will be following Him, so they will follow and understand God. And He's going to do even greater things in their lives than He's doing in mine. So, I think that's so important as parents that we can know that God sees the bigger picture.
That's so beautiful, Trisha, because what you're trying to see is that it's not about you. It's what you can pass on. And so to the next, it's what you can pass on to the next generation, to your kids, so they can pass them on to their kids, so that you can impact generations, so you can impact your great grandchildren or great great grandchildren. And that's so neat. One thing that I took away from today's reading was just the story of Abram.
Mhm.
And it was probably, I don't know, maybe 5 years ago, I was challenged to memorize a portion of Hebrews. And so while ladies in my Bible study were memorizing, a few verses here and there, for some reason, I don't know why, I was like, I'm going to memorize an entire chapter.
I
And
love
so
that.
so I took on Hebrews 11, and do you remember it's the chapter of
Faith.
basically the hall of faith.
Mhm.
And so I just want to read here where it's talking about Abram. And in verse 17 of Hebrews 11, by faith, Abraham, when he was tested, oh, wait, sorry. Let's go up. Sorry that it's verse 8 of Hebrews 11. By faith, Abram obeyed when he was called to go to a place that he was to receive an inheritance. And he went out not knowing where he was going. By faith, he went to live in the land of promise, as in foreign lands, living in tents with Isaac and Jacob. Now, we haven't heard about Isaac and Jacob just yet in our story, but Isaac and Jacob, heirs with him of the same promise, for he was looking forward to the city that has foundations, whose designer and builder is God.
Mm.
And it just reading, having that in my mind as I'm reading through this and thinking, He was looking forward to spending eternity with God. He knew that there was this eternity and that he was building foundations. So it's kind of like the foundation you're talking about building for your children. He was looking at building foundation in the city, the big city, the eternal city in heaven. And I just love how scripture goes back and forth and can point us in different directions.
It's so good. And I think Abram, the whole part about faith is he couldn't see what was ahead. Like they're
Mhm.
headed toward the wilderness because they left the city, which was a big, prosperous city, and heading out in the middle of nowhere. Now, Lot, you mentioned, he veered off. There's the cities of Sodom and Gomorrah that's coming up, but he
Mhm.
wanted to be by the cities. Abram was still in this kind of wilderness place. And I think sometimes in our lives we don't understand what God is doing, and we think we're following God, and like, God, we want to obey you here, but this is way harder than we thought. John and I adopted 7 kids. We were following
Mhm.
God. We were obeying God. There were some times and I felt like I was in the wilderness, like, what was going
Yeah.
on here?
Yeah.
But God sees the bigger picture, just like he saw with Abram, who became Abraham, just like he saw with the generations to follow. God sees the bigger picture, and what may be the wilderness to us ends up pointing us to the promised land or becoming the promised land. And in that communion with God as we're following him, like you said, I love that. Abraham saw the eternal city that God was
Mhm.
preparing for him. So he's led to the wilderness, but it built this relationship with God that led him to looking to the hope of God and the hope of eternity with him. So sometimes when it seems like God is leading us away from the easy life, the good life, he has
Yes.
so much in store for us.
So true. So true. Well, and I feel like your story of your adoption, and I have been there for most of those adoptions,
Yes.
for most of those children that you guys have brought into your home. And just that story is a story that brings us to the word of the day because it's persistence.
Hmm.
You guys had persistence. I watched you and your husband John live out that persistence, even though it wasn't easy. You were like, no, God has called us to this. God has called us to this, and we believe it. You didn't know exactly what He was exactly calling you to as you adopt each child, but you knew that He had called you to that. And that's just like the persistence of Abram in believing God. He knew God was calling him to move and live in tents and to continue moving and living in Canaan. And the persistence, and then I also think of it's the persistence of God to care for his children, to care for those who love him. He cared for Abram
Hmm.
as he was living in those tents. He cared for him. And I mean, as we read, we're seeing that Abram amassed lots of servants, and that had to have taken a lot of crops, a lot of something in order to amass that many servants. And so God provided
Yeah.
so carefully for Abram.
And so I think really the application for us today is first trust God's call. Like, even though it seems like
Mm,
we're going into a
yeah.
wilderness season, first trust his call and then know that he will provide for us and know that it's often a bigger plan than we ever imagined. So this was an eternal plan that God was pointing to, and but it takes those steps of faith. So if you feel
Yeah.
God is stirring within you something, that he's calling you to something, it will be hard. That's why
Mhm.
it's persistence. If it was
Yeah.
easy, it would be floating. I don't know, it'd be something
Yes,
else.
exactly.
But it is persistence because we have to keep going in the direction God calls us to. But he's there, he's able to provide for us, he's able to help us. As we see in these stories coming up, God continued over and over again to provide and care for Abraham and his descendants. But we have to take those steps of obedience. We have to
Mhm.
step out.
It's taking those steps. It's well, I guess persistence in our daily Bible reading. That's
Yeah.
what we're learning right now is persistence to read his word. And tomorrow's reading is Genesis chapter 15 and chapter 16 and then chapter 17 through verse 27. So it was Genesis 15, 16, and 17 through verse 27. And so, friend, I hope you are encouraged today. That is the desire of Tricia and my heart, is just to encourage you to stay in the word and continue to soak in and let God just minister to your heart and teach you things of him and then teach you things of yourself. And we just want to send you off with daily encouragement to get into the word and be the hands and feet of Jesus.
So the fact that you are already here with us, you didn't stop at day 1. You
That's
are
true.
here. We're
That's
continuing
so
on.
true.
Great
Your
job for
persistence.
persisting. Good job. So we want you to continue. We also have a community on Facebook. You can look at Daily Bible Podcast. You can search that under Facebook groups, or you can go to dailybiblepodcast.net. And we also have the links that you can get into our Facebook group where we can continue to encourage each other to
Mhm.
persist.
So exciting to be on this journey with you. Thank you for listening.
Thank you.
Bye.